Hello, and welcome very much to the second panel we're doing today at the Data for Development conference as part of the EU Africa The Journey Hackathon. So it's the second panel we're doing today, and the topic today is very much about financial services. So I'm very, very glad to welcome here today to the panel four distinguished guests with whom I hope we have a very fruitful discussion, a very engaging discussion on the best way to lift the continent and learn from each other to see what we can do for Africa. So having said that, let's jump straight into the panelists who are eagerly waiting to jump in. So let's start with welcoming them and having them say a few words about themselves, their background, and their connection to the topic. And I will start with Jeanette. So Jeanette Udu, you're from Access Bank. Where are you reaching us from at the moment? And tell us a little bit about your background. 1 second, you're on mute.
Hi. That's the most used word in 2020 and 2021. Thank you for having me. I'm Jeanette Udu, and I'm currently joining from the beautiful city of Lagos, Nigeria. I currently head innovation at Access Bank, the largest bank in Africa by customer base and branches, where I drive the innovation culture of more than 10,000 employees, aside from the subsidiaries. I am also the founder of Africa Rising Women in Innovation. It's a community of innovators championing the cause of African and New African women in innovation. And I founded that in response to the gender and the diversity gap in innovation. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Super. Thank you so much for joining us. Then also with a strong connection to Nigeria, we have Ibrahim, who's actually joining us from Tallinn. Ibrahim, go ahead.
Hi, hello everyone, and nice to meet all of you. My name is Ibrahim from a startup called Delali. We're an income and expense management tool for African SMEs. We launched our beta version on 31st of January this year, and have been steadily growing and looking for ways to improve financial management among SMEs. I have over 20 years of experience in business development, particularly in Nigeria, and where I'm usually based. And today, right now, I'm joining in from a relatively warm, 1 degree Tallinn, Estonia. So nice to meet all of you.
Nice to have you here, Ibrahim. As I look outside the window, I see snow falling, so quite different from what the others are probably experiencing. Then from very far away, we have Vivian joining us. Vivian, are you currently in Brazil?
Yes, I am in Brazil. I'm talking to you from the Northeast, from Salvador, and yes, it's warmer. So thank you for the invitation, João. Would you like me to present myself?
Yes, give us a few words about your background and connection with this topic.
Yes, for sure. I'm the co-founder of BRASFI, that you can see here is the Brazilian Research Alliance for Sustainable Finance and Investment. I'm finishing my PhD with this focus of ESG investment, specifically studying the exposure of the international reserves to environmental risks. I'm a PhD fellow and an analyst of the Central Bank of Brazil. So here, I think on the top of that, I have more than 20 years of experience in corporate governance in public and private sector, including areas of risk management, compliance, internal and external auditing, M&A, due diligence, controllers office in Brazil and abroad, Germany mainly, and some other countries here in Latin America. In Africa, only Cabo Verde, Cape Verde, once. Unfortunately, I will have to join you again. Final words just about the link with the European Europe. I was one of the 6 members of the Research and Innovation Committee of the Green Finance Program for Brazil of the United Kingdom. I'm a member of the Chamber of Innovation for Sustainability of the city of Salvador. That is one of the 100 resilient cities and 100 of the and one of the 40 cities of the climate cities, resilient climate cities. That it's also a UK program. In this panel here in Salvador, GIZ and the German government are pretty much related. And in the federal government, also some initiatives are coming, and I'm involved. That is also related to the cooperation between Brazil and Germany. So I hope I can give some inputs. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Vivian. And finally, we have Farhan from Privanova, who I think is joining us from France.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you're right. So hello, everyone. My name is Farhan. I'm currently working with Privanova as a Director General. I'm based in Paris. The company is based in Paris as well. Regarding my background, it's more on cybersecurity on the financial institutions. So I work with Capgemini in the financial services. It's a big four company. I work with Interpol for 5 years, where I was working with 194 member countries, especially focusing on cybercrime and cybersecurity issues towards these critical infrastructure, especially financial services. I also worked with the United Nations as a financial investigator. Before that, I worked with Pakistan Police for 12 years as a deputy director of cybercrime. So I'm more focusing on the issues financial services are using. I mean, with relates to cybersecurity. So I think my presence in today's panel will be also towards that aspects that I can be, I think, contributing from my side. Thanks very much.
Super, super. So as you can see, we have a very distinguished panel here to talk about issues related around financial services as it touches Africa and the EU-Africa collaboration. So what I would like to bring the discussion towards a little bit here is, we're doing this big hackathon. Teams are working very diligently and hard on building their prototypes, building new services, building new products for this sector. And what I would like to talk a little bit about is, first of all, what are some of the biggest challenges that we see in Africa as it touches the topic of financial services? So together with the biggest challenges, we might also see what are the biggest opportunities for startups to come in and play a role in solving them and mitigating them. And then we can talk about, a little bit later, we can talk about issues connected with access to financing as it connects with startups. And we can talk about a little bit the financial inclusion topic. But first, let's talk a little bit about the biggest challenges and the opportunities for startups. And Ibrahim, perhaps we can start with you. Where do you see the landscape currently in Africa about the challenges and opportunities for startups?
Well, I think Vivian will have been, Jeanette will have been a better person to start with, since she's in the finance space. But however, I can go. I think one of the biggest challenges, I think, when you look at Africa-wide, I think it will have to do with integration across different markets. That's an infrastructure. Those are the biggest challenges straight out of the gate. Africa is large, and I think one of the misconceptions is that it's a small continent. Take Nigeria for example, to put things in context. Nigeria's size-wise population is half of Europe. In terms of landmass, you're talking about Germany and Poland fitting into Nigeria alone, and it is still not one of the biggest countries land-wise in Africa. So it's a really large continent, and the challenges that has to do with infrastructure is real. Again, policy across different governments, because if you are a Nigerian company, for example, trying to do business in Ghana or maybe Congo, Kinshasa, it's the policies are different. And when it comes to financial services, it means that the biggest obstacle for each startup is having to register in each country, and abide by those rules of those environments. So
a lack of sort of inter-country framework that would allow some of these companies to operate across different geographies.
Yes, because each country is looking at a way of protecting themselves, because it's and again, because technology is very fast paced. You have a situation where policy makers are still trying to understand or catch up with the fast changing environments that and fintechs that are really pushing the boundaries when it comes to innovation.
Right. And Jeanette, let's then go to you. How do you see the picture in this sector in terms of the the biggest opportunities for startups to play a role in maybe disrupting this sector?
So for me, in addition to what Ibrahim had just mentioned around regulation, just to buttress more on that, I mean, like for fintechs, for example, it sounds pretty simple. You have a disruptive innovation, you talk to the government, they issue a license, but it's more complex than it meets the eye. So fintechs are really very interested in talks around fintech regulation and banks as well, because it has put us at our own feet to disrupt innovation and to disrupt the entire industry. Because fintechs are nimble, they are very agile, it's easy for them to pivot. So banks, traditional banks have become very attuned to that purpose, and we are becoming more smarter, more savvier, and more technology driven compared to what we had before. And to answer your question around, sorry?
Yeah, because you touched on a topic about the corporates and the startups, which is definitely something that I want to touch upon here as well. How close is the relationship, or how open are these big corporates, namely the banks, to work with startups within the African context to get this infusion of energy, of new ideas coming in? Or on the other hand, are they very protective about having a almost monopoly on this market, and then a little bit afraid of what startups are doing or the fintech sector is doing?
Yeah, so for fintechs and banks, initially it was a little bit awkward, but we've realized that it's about partnerships, right? So it's for us to succeed, for fintechs to succeed, for banks to succeed, we have to partner together. I was involved in a roundtable discussion that involved fintechs, banks, and the regulators. So you could see that tension in the room, where fintechs are not happy about being the regulators not really understanding what they're trying to champion, and then the banks seeing the fintechs as a threat, and the regulators, just not trying to stifle innovation, but still trying to regulate the market. So for fintechs and banks, everybody has realized that for us to thrive, we have to partner. So there have been partnerships with fintechs. We have partners in that regard, working with us in delivering services to our customers. So partnerships is very key. If you don't partner as a fintech, you won't be able to scale easily. But when you realize that you have to partner with traditional banks, it's easier for you to scale and then reach to other customers that you might not be able to reach with your offering. So that helps. And with banks providing agency banking, merchants, mobile money, wallets, and having fintechs also deliver that. And I think with the regulation around open banking that hasn't been launched yet, but is still in talks, it's a good step in the right direction. Because with that and embedded finance, banking as a service, that would also help to scale financial inclusion in Nigeria between fintech and bank partnerships.
Yeah, but I think here also this, we are aware that there are many opportunities. It's like you said, how can we forge those partnerships to take advantage of those in a way that everyone benefits from it? But my gut feeling is that these large bank corporates are somewhat reluctant, and then what you see in some cases is, for example, the telcos might be the ones jumping in to take advantage of these opportunities with things like mobile money, right? And then you see some of these opportunities go somewhere else. But let me bring Farhan and Vivian to the discussion as well in terms of the opportunities in this sector. And I think Farhan, for you, probably you're going to talk a lot about the cybersecurity aspect of the transactions and the opportunities in that sector.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yes, sorry. So yes, regarding the aspect of cybersecurity, so I can say that the finance industry has undergone a fundamental shift for many years now in Africa. and taking into account that nearly 1.2 billion people are registered for mobile money, for example, right? They're based in sub-Saharan African countries, and that 63% of that mobile dollar have value spent in this region. That makes sense that it has become a zone for investors and cyber criminals alike. In other words, if I can say that embracing technological transformation has increased cyber risk and threats to digital infrastructure services as well, data, which rely now increasingly connected system in Africa. For example, data breach continue to be a concern in the financial service industry in Africa. And now financial services are a prime target for cybercrime due to a sensitive nature of the data. And with the increase of transaction and communication online, I can say that security and risk mitigation have been one of the biggest challenge I can see in the financial services of Africa as well.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, as we move more of these transactions, as we move more of these services to an online or mobile environment, then there needs to be a huge work in terms of, you know, when we talk of financial inclusion, it's not just about the services, but it's also about the education regarding how to use these services, how to avoid some of the dangers connected with moving money online. I think in some cases, having money under your bed, at least you know where it is, but once you move them into a digital environment, it becomes increasingly riskier. Yeah. And
if I say something more on
yeah,
that,
go ahead.
So, I mean, most African countries, first of all, they don't have any advocate cybercrime regulation in place, and they have also a significant skill shortage for the government, for the companies, and also a low level of general awareness means most consumers don't know how to ensure that their online behavior is secure and smart. That's a problem with
Exactly.
Africa. Another issue is the significant number of African businesses operate without basic security control in place. So, because you have rapid, increase in technology, and these are the main issues that I can see are a big concern for Africa altogether in general.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Vivian, from your perspective, obviously coming from Brazil, which is a country that has made a lot of efforts in the digitizing, not just of the financial services, but the whole economy. What are potentially some of the issues that you've seen happening there that relate to the reality nowadays in Africa in terms of the opportunities and how some of these startups can take advantage of them?
Yeah, one thing that I think that more than the issues, maybe the moment, if you allowed me to share with you some links with what they said and what we can take as a benchmark now with what is happening, is just because Brazil has just finished the open banking, the 4 phases of the open banking. And I put 4 links in the chat. I don't know if you can share with the audience, but they are all in English, so it's easy to read. And there are some links also from news from the Washington Post and from Bloomberg. And so it's easy to understand also the technical aspects. But the open banking, that was an initiative that came from around 4 years inside the regulator, the central bank in Brazil, now allowed all the connection among the banks. And now, trying to achieve the open banking as a final solution, we had a very, very interesting product in Brazil that was the Pix. The Pix was a platform that allowed every citizen to connect to each other and to make a transfer at any time. So commercial or non-commercial day, anytime during the day. And this was a huge had a huge impact in financial digital inclusion. Now we have 130 million people integrated in the financial system. And when we go outside in the street and you try to buy an ice cream in the beach or try to park your car, you pay, you take your cell phone and you just put one code that it's for example, your code that is the personal ID, the federal one, and automatically they recognize where is the bank of the other person and just send the money, no tax, no cost, immediately. So this came from something from the government in Brazil, but the technology and how it worked, it's something that I think it's something to be analyzed and discussed, because what happened in Brazil, so linking to your question, Jean-Ray, was not through the telecom. You know what I mean? So here, this was not the way, but this also now Nubank, that it's a startup and now it's not a startup anymore because its value, it's bigger than the major bank, physical bank in Brazil, but just open capital. And you will see that this boom of the valuation of the company is mainly because of the opportunities through the open banking.
Exactly.
So, and this brings a huge opportunity for all the sector. So sorry for this discussion, but I think this is something that can bring
I think it makes a lot of sense. Vivian, I think it makes a lot of sense because, if I reflect back on the realities in Europe about open banking and this, PSD2 regulations and the connections between banks and how this opened up the opportunity for startups to take advantage of this, because before a lot of this was locked into the silos that banks were being very protective about. And once this regulations came through and the opportunities were opened up, then you see a lot of startups working as aggregators of data, being, included in the middleman and in the user interface. So what they did is that, the banks take care of the back end and we take care of the front end. So a lot of opportunities for startups to do the interface between the consumers and the banking services. But I have a provocative question for Jeanette and maybe for Ibrahim, which is when we talk about open banking and we talk about the reality of Africa, first of all, is there a maturity in the banking sector to make sure that they do want to open up? And are we there yet in terms of this opportunity to open it up? So maybe, Ibrahim, you can talk a little bit about that. And then, Jeanette, I would love to hear your opinion about, are the banks willing to do this openness? Or do they see it as a threat? Because, maybe they want to be protective about the consumers that they have, about the data about these consumers, about the services that they're providing, and they don't want to have this sort of open aspect to it. So Ibrahim, maybe let's start with you.
Well, I'll start with, as usual, I'll start with Nigeria and what the central bank has been able to do. I think more than 10 years ago, that whole integration with banks had already started. And by the time the central bank introduced the something called like the universal bank account numbers, which the banks the central bank took the lead in transitioning most banks to having a universal banking number code, just like what you have in Europe and other places. And through the interbank network, they had already integrated all the development and advancement of fintech startups in Nigeria today has been as a result of that. So I'll say that there has been more openness and willingness of the banks to work with startups. And if you look at the drive in Nigeria's growth, and that is being mirrored in all other African countries. You see that first it started with infrastructure, which was basic internet, which then the banking system used that infrastructure to centralize and improve interconnectivity among themselves and interoperability, which made it easier for other services to start sitting on the banking infrastructure that exists today. So yes, there has been a lot that has been done. We see that the central bank has also taken the lead in Nigeria to introduce their own version of blockchain electronic money, which should reduce cost of transactions significantly and increase electronic transactions, because right now still at least 90% of transactions are still done in cash. So what we're seeing with the fintechs and with the banks in the economy today is just a tip of all the possibilities that can be achieved. There's still a lot of work to be done, but like I said, we've seen, not to sound overly positive, but we've seen that has worked very well in Nigeria. It's also the same in other African countries. You see that they're beginning to open up a little more, but the key thing now is, despite the silos in each country, how can we now facilitate interoperability between countries within the continent?
Yeah.
When that happens, then that will unlock all the opportunities for trade and seamless transactions, and that is where the Africa Free Trade Act comes in, which has been ratified by most countries in Africa. Almost, I think, all but 2 countries in Africa.
Exactly, and I think this is just echoing what Vivian was saying about the opportunities that are open from this open banking, and looking at the example of Europe, where a lot of these opportunities come for cross-country services to be provided to citizens. Jeanette, how do the corporates see it? How do the big entrenched banks look at this? Do they see it as an opportunity, or do they see it as a threat?
The corporates, we see it as a huge opportunity, not even a threat, because currently we've opened our minds to the facts to understand that these fintechs are not threats to us, but rather we're partnering together to deliver these services that our customers need, right? So you can have a fintech that has more data points than what a traditional bank might have and integrate their API with ours. And that works for the customer, because at the end of it, it's about the customer. It isn't about us. Our customers have to be happy at the end of the day. Just like what Ibrahim said, open banking hasn't been launched in Nigeria yet, but there are already talks around that, but banks are already open to that. For example, at Access Bank, we've already been proactive enough to establish a digital partnerships team that works with fintechs as well in that regard. And we also have our Africa FinTech Foundry, where we work with startups. So we've been working with startups years before this conversation started, and working with startups has helped us, to also integrate into that system as well. And we know that, when it comes to financial inclusion, is a strong lever for bridging income inequality and also combating poverty and preserving social harmony. And opportunities around that are also what banks are open to partner with fintechs in that regard, because there are lots of opportunities for fintechs or for banks as well to have customers in that space. For example, only 2% of Nigerians are insured. So there is a lot of opportunity in that space, right? For fintechs, we already have fintechs that are speaking to that digital insurance space, and banks working together with them as well. And also there in retirement pension, we have maybe like about 7% of adults that are
so let's dive right into that topic, which is where some of this, looking ahead, if you're one of the participants at this hackathon, or if you are just thinking of starting a company in this sector, where do you see the potential for growth? Is it still in the financial inclusion and bringing the basic services to these unbanked, or is it already on the mature enough level where you start thinking about things like insurance, savings, pensions, investments, and providing some of these additional services to the economy? And I would like to also bring here the aspect of services that are provided cross-country, so that's even, at least judging from the experience of being here in Estonia, a very small country, where you start to think of providing services globally from day one, just because the internal market is too small. Obviously, if you look at Nigeria, as Ibrahim said, it's half the population of Europe, so there's an internal market that's big enough. Vivian from Brazil, of course, you guys have a huge internal market. But if you're coming from Rwanda, if you're coming from Namibia, perhaps you start to think of Africa as your playground, right? So what type of services make sense in that context? And are we there already, that it's talking about things like insurance, pensions, investments, and these sort of things? What's your take on that? I don't know who wants to go first. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can I can just share my thoughts around that. Personally, for me, I think fintechs in Nigeria, in Africa, as a whole, would grow more faster than established fintechs in Europe. Why do I say that? Because for Europe markets, when it comes to financial inclusion, you can't compare it to what we have in Nigeria. So the Central Bank of Nigeria had a target, a financial inclusion target of reaching about 80% financial inclusion for the citizens by 2020. This is 2021. I think we're around 66, 61% of that. So in that space, there's still lots of opportunities, right? And for a startup that is starting in Africa, there is a massive growth. From 2017 to 2019, there was a 197% increase in startup funding investment in Africa, not just from African investors, but in diaspora, from diaspora as well. So that tells you that there is a good mind here in Africa, and for Africa, you can bootstrap, you can start from the scratch. There's several opportunities, like I've mentioned, compared to Europe, that most of the fintechs are leveraging or building on existing infrastructure or existing platforms to scale. So for me, I think emerging tech, like maybe clean tech, for example, there's been a lot of traction in that space. There has been some sort of ubiquity there, and edtech as well. Aside from fintech, fintech is the major part of it because there are several financial solutions to be solved. In insurance, we lag behind in insurance compared to Europe, right? So that is another space where fintechs are leveraging: insurance, pension, edtech, clean energy tech, and fintech as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Farhan, I want to bring you to the discussion because I think Jeanette mentioned the diaspora, and it's not the first time that we hear this this topic being raised in different panels. When we were talking about healthcare, the diaspora also plays a large role in some of the financing opportunities there. So when we talk about financial services, is there a role for the diaspora to play here, or are there services where the diaspora needs some of these financial services that are available, for example, in their country of destination, that would facilitate some of the funding opportunities back home? So are there linkages here with the diaspora?
I mean, if you are talking about funding opportunities, for example, right? So, but before that, I would like to just take you back towards the last question we were discussing regarding financial inclusion. I think it's all about efforts to build on capabilities, especially during this pandemic thing, to have the trust building, first of all. Trust building among users and operators. That means we need to work on global best practices. We need to work on robust regulation to work on or to establish operational standards, and also basically to work on consumer protection against fraud and data breaches. These things gonna start build the trust, right? There's gonna also include basically when people talk about financial inclusion, they say that financial inclusion is one of Africa's great success stories over the past decade. But thanks to this digitization process, however, the future of success story will also depend on the attention and resource we are going to devote to the cybersecurity, for example, right? One of the issue. So moving forward, it is very important for African countries to make financial inclusion as an integral part of their national or I would say social investment program altogether, right? So the trust is of course lacking as well. And then when we talk about basically the funding aspect, I can bring you to the point where we have European funding for startup, because I also work with the European Commission as an expert. When there are a lot of funds, especially the new funding opportunities called EIC Accelerator, is only for those startup companies or SME, new SMEs. So I think when we talk about opportunities, that means innovation and entrepreneurship are the powerful social and economic growth engines. So in this regard, I think cooperation is very necessary in innovation. And I think it is good that not only current gap in investment targeting entrepreneurs or SMEs, but also the main gap in local capacities for innovation should be addressed. So I think innovation is the main key. where you feel like, okay, what are the problem that we have, and then I think it's good to start working on that. That's gonna basically bring they're gonna bring maybe that foster sustainable growth. It's gonna bring more jobs and innovation. So I think everything counts. So there are some programs announced by the European Commission that are actually specifically assigned to the African countries. They are inviting African countries to apply for the European funding. So they work together with European countries together, and then they build, let's suppose, technology, something like this. So this is a multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder program. So I would suggest that these new startup companies, even participant hackathon, they should see those programs. There are a lot of funding opportunities in agriculture and health and finance and energy. So these are the things that I think that's with the help of I think partnership we can work on that one.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that you brought in the sustainability topic to the discussion, because when we talk about financial inclusion and we talk about financial services, there's obviously a lot to be said about the sustainable development of these economies, right? And Vivian, maybe from your perspective, the opportunities that are there to develop these sort of linkages and connections with sustainable programs, the funding opportunities for Africa and for these countries, just as Farhan was saying, are they moving towards, do you see that they're moving towards these sustainable opportunities, or what is the role of sustainability in looking at funding opportunities?
Jean, thank you for your question. I think that there are momentum for focusing on the S of the ESG factors. And we are talking a lot about financial digital inclusion. And this is for sure something that must be focused. And this is totally connected with the discussion of sustainability. You cannot try to improve the level of the citizens without financial digital inclusion. So it's totally connected with the agenda. And we see since Paris Agreement in 2018, the agreement between the developed world and the underdeveloping world of financial flows to invest in this agenda, what we can see is that fintechs are totally connected with this discussion, and we see in all documents of the sustainable finance, ESG and sustainability agenda. And so it is something to be on the spot in this funding focus. And just if you allowed me just to give one insight also, just to connecting, because in the beginning, Jeanette just brought us a relevant point of regulation. And I think that's something that is interesting, just in my perspective to share, is the regulatory sandboxes that are happening worldwide. So for example, in Brazil also, we had a regulatory sandbox in the country that was pretty much important to this development of the fintechs. So also I left the link in the chat, it's everything in English. And also something that can be nice for the participants of the hackathon. There is a fintech network with more than 700 fintechs that were developed that are now opened in Brazil, just focusing on this sector. So maybe it's interesting to see, because of course, in Brazil, we have already more than 96% of people inside the banking system. So it's different from the other realities. So, but maybe you can mirror, just see in the horizon where you can achieve, and then maybe in an environment more similar to Africa than comparing, for example, with the
Europe.
World.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think especially if you look at the, what we were talking about, if you look at these 700 startups, what are their key focus areas, and what are the services that they're developing for the financial inclusion? So is it on the insurance? Is it on the investment opportunities? Is it on the funding opportunities? Because what I'd like to bring the discussion a little bit towards now, if Ibrahim wants to join. Sorry, Farhan, you had something. Yeah, sure.
Yes. I have just posted a link of the program called Africa-Europe Innovation Partnership, AEIP. This is the pilot project of the Partnership on Innovations. and aims to connect high quality tech hubs from both continents, from Africa plus from Europe, to explore opportunities for mutually beneficial partnership. So, I mean, that was launched in 2019, and the purpose was to support African Union Commission to have the deeper, cooperation between these two countries. So you just see this link. I think this is a good example on how these new startup can see themselves participating in such programs. It's only this allows startup plus SMEs to engage in new business opportunity providing by support. So I think at least I can see from European Commission side they're quite serious in providing these new companies, new I
Super.
think platform, especially I mean in this way. So just have a link and I can
Yeah.
provide you more detail on this afterwards.
No, super. I think that was the topic that I was going to go to right away. So it's great that you brought it up yourself. But I'll try to make sure that on the Garage 48 team, someone takes the links that you guys have been posting and makes sure that the audience, either on Facebook or on the Slack for the participants of the hackathon, they take a look at what you've been sharing. But regarding this topic specifically, this is where I wanted to bring the discussion towards and bring Ibrahim to the discussion. On the discussion regarding funding opportunities for startups, and one of my favorite topics in all of these panels is in terms of impact. So how can we have the biggest impact in allowing these entrepreneurs, all of this entrepreneurial spirit to flourish? We had a discussion just before this one on job security. And on the job security panel, we were talking about encouraging entrepreneurship as a way to create more jobs so that people take their future in their own hands and they create their own jobs. So if you look at funding opportunities, of course, Farhan already mentioned some of the European initiatives. We already talked about a lot of different opportunities for these startups. But I want to talk about two things, microcredit and crowdfunding opportunities for startups in Africa. Are they there? Are these opportunities there? Or are we still talking about looking for funding opportunities outside of Africa? So when do we reach a state where there is money available, but this money won't go into real estate investments, but it will go into crowdfunding opportunities or opportunities for funding startups? Ibrahim, what's your experience with this, and how do you see it now that you've spent some time here in Estonia and you are aware of platforms like Funderbeam and others?
Well, crowdfunding it's known in Africa. What it's used for, it's a different case. I think I was just taking notes on what you were saying, and I can remember Farhan mentioned something. Farhan and Jeanette mentioned two things. One is the trust factor. How do we build systems that enable trust? And when that trust factor kicks in and investors or people that are investing in these crowdfunding schemes, it makes it a lot easier for them it builds their confidence in investing in these things. Second is policy on the government side. How does the government policies are not very clear on such schemes, so it makes it very difficult. I'll give you an example with my country, Nigeria, where, just like that, a policy statement was issued saying, oh, all crypto activities are now illegal, right? Making it difficult for any investor that has put in money into a crypto or blockchain-based business or startup to say, okay, hey, how are we not sure? What are the assurances that I will invest in another disruptive sector? Disruptive is the word. And a policy change happens. What happens to my investment? What happens to my money? So these are things that there needs to be better clarity from the policy side, and also building trust in the system. If you look at Europe, I mean, I've been in Estonia for a few months, and you see that the entire system has been built where your identity is connected to everything. Vivian mentioned, oh, you can go put in your code, and that's it. Now in Africa, do we even know how many we are? Do we know? Do we know? Do we know the identity? Because unfortunately, I won't go to the colonial era and the whole mess that caused. But when you look at cross-border activities, someone in Benin Republic and Nigeria are actually from the same. They're like two villages or one community that's been divided by borders. So who sits where? So these are the factors that we have to look more inwards to say, okay, just like how we're now building universal systems and integrations within our little sort of silos, how can we start to have a universal policy that cuts across all countries for example, for identity management, which makes it easier for banking and financing, which makes it easier to track investments, track money, trace people to know that, okay, if I give person X money for an investment or if I crowdfund, I can follow it.
Exactly.
You follow the money and be able to find it.
So trust as a service almost becomes something needed and something that potentially there's opportunities there. When I was talking about,
if I can just add here, what
yeah, absolutely.
My colleague just said, I think in addition to what Ibrahim has said, there are some other factors. First of all, that complex and consistent regulation is also an issue that we face. Number two, advocate data communication infrastructure is also a problem, I think. And thirdly, I think maybe the fragmented marketplace of 54 countries. These are the things that we can add further to what Ibrahim has said that need to be worked on by the government, I would say.
Yeah, I think the policymakers and the regulatory bodies need to be the ones addressing this. Obviously, with the recommendations from people like us and from the private sector. Vivian, if you look at the funding opportunities and the way that you got to these 700 startups working on this specific topic, what are your recommendations, or what do you see the next steps would be for countries like Nigeria, or for countries that are slightly closer in the development path to where Brazil is at the moment? What are the next steps in terms of opening up the funding opportunities for these startups? Are these government programs? Are these private sector initiatives? Are we talking of there being enough capital to invest into these startups coming from everyday investors? Where do you see these opportunities, and what are the next steps for Africa?
This is something that always brought my attention, that it's complicated to me because we speak as Africa as a country, isn't it? Because
it isn't. So of course, it isn't.
Yes. What I would say broadly is that what we see in Brazil, that some things really happened to the ecosystem. So, for example, we had some labs. Lab for innovation for finance, lab for fintechs, and this ecosystem brought, and it was really pushed by multilateral cooperation. So you have German government, UK government, and then you have the Inter-American Development Bank. So you have some banks that with support and funding to the agenda, and then you put in this ecosystem corporates, you put regulators, and you bring everyone to the table. And I put in the chat the links of how this worked in Brazil, so the labs we have. But in this environment, you can bring the discussion, you can show, you can better, because it seems simple, but it isn't. The communication and the exposure. Isn't it?
And are these labs also connected with these sandboxes that you were talking about? These sort of regulatory sandboxes?
Somehow also. So so everything brings. So I think it's like a big puzzle, and all these pieces are giving support to a better environment for the development of the solution, and then funding also.
Exactly.
Because also then the investor has the trust to put the money. Isn't it better than, because there is a context for, but it's challenging, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's not easy. I don't want to mean that it's easy.
Yeah,
but
just like Ibrahim was saying, the trust factor, that that your funding is going to go and is going to be tracked, and there's a return on investment that is visible. Yeah. And
if I may add very
sure.
quickly, one thing that is going to build that trust is funding needs to be localized. And by that, I mean, how can we continue to build the angel networks, start to build local VC around not just each country, but even breaking it down to regions and even smaller enclaves where you can say, okay, with a 10,000 euro investment among maybe 10 investors or so, that can kickstart every startup, rather than you're still at the ideation stage and you're looking for money from US investors and all those markets. We need to continue to build those angel networks.
Makes sense. Viviane, you wanted to add something here?
Just adding something that's interesting in this tracking, that's the blockchain technology that are being used for green bonds to help tracking. Because the green bond, what is this? Is when in one side you have a project with impact in the real world that is saying that you have something better for environment, but you can have a social bond for a purpose of digital inclusion or something like this, isn't it? And then you track that the money is being used as stated through blockchain. So this is already happening. And also something that we are seeing in Brazil with cattle, that people are using satellites. And there is a name for this, that is satellite finance. So this is just to bring some food for thought for the startups also. So blockchain and satellite image to track when you are talking about environmental questions.
I think a lot of these topics we definitely want to cover in the panel we're having just after this one, which is about digitizing the economy. And as we're coming to the end of this one, I would like to leave you guys with the opportunity to give some encouraging words to all the teams that are working on the hackathon, specifically those working on the financial services challenge. Some words of encouragement towards the teams and kind of an outlook for the future and the opportunities out there in this field. So, Jeanette, maybe we can start with you.
Yes, before I give some words of encouragement, I also wanted to add to the contributions from Ibrahim and Vivian around the funding parts in Africa. So I'm aware that there has been some awareness around that. So we have individuals that are now having funding collectives, speaking to startups, and also women as well, creating angel investment funds as well. So that is gaining traction as we speak. And there are also unicorns investing in early stage startups. So it is good, but there still has to be a lot of work to be done, just like they said. And the word of encouragement I would like to tell them is, I mean, if you listen to all of us speak, you can see there are lots of opportunities. So for whatever products that you are building or product that you have built, you are the best seller of that product, right? So you are the one that can sell it best. So for wherever you find yourself, you have to be your own advocate. You don't have any entitlement attitude to say, oh, my friends are not supporting me, whoever isn't supporting me. You are your own supporter. And the confidence you have in your products would sell to other people to believe in you, to even fund you. So those are my words of encouragement.
Super. Thank you so much. Farhan, from your side?
Yes, two things. Before I go to the encouragement stuff, I would like to say that the issue, apart from trust, I see is a lack of commitment. For example, I give you a slight example that there is an index called, I think it's Global Cybersecurity Index. They said that out of 54 countries, 29 only have implemented the cybersecurity, right? So there's a lack of commitment that need to do. Those who have implemented, they haven't enforced it yet. So these things also bring basically those, I think, trust as well. So I think there is a need. If I talk about basically from the cybersecurity side, so I think there is a need to have a close collaboration with cybersecurity organizations. They should work with Africa on this one, how to basically improve their critical infrastructure. And secondly, for these companies, I think they have to make sure that they bring innovation to their products. I think because if I compare it with Europe is working it like multi-stakeholder stuff. So if we work on a project, that means we work together with end users, with industry, with SME university. So we need to see that kind of collaboration as well. SMEs should work with universities, should work with basically industry as well, to make sure that they really needs to see the real end user needs in order to be in the market. They don't miss any point. That's I think my final thought on this one. Thanks.
Super. Thank you so much. Vivian, from your side.
Oh, I would say my final words would be trying to stimulate people for networking and connection and better communication and exposure, and with a focus also in benchmarking, because if we believe that a few things we really invent, a lot of things we just transform, isn't it? Or we just bring from another reality to that reality. So I think that make our way shorter.
Super.
So
super.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. And finally, Ibrahim, from you.
Well, as probably one of the only startups on this panel, I think, and having attended different hackathons, I think the important thing is to have fun at what you're doing, ideate, test everything, look towards collaboration. Like Vivian said, networking. Your next co-founder, your next hire may be in this network here. This idea you're working on may not even be the final thing. You may be talking with someone and something would spark. So collaboration and openness are key. Believe in your vision and what you're trying to do. Most important, bringing innovation into whatever changes or whatever product you're developing, and don't waste time. The funniest thing is that most of the solutions that you see out there, it took less than 3 weeks to get them to market. At least a crappy version that was working to test out. So have fun and let's see what you're going to do.
Super. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to thank my panel and the panelists we had here, Jeanette, Vivian, Ibrahim, and Farhan, for your thoughts, for sharing your insights about this topic. We know that the topic of financial services is one where there's a large amount of opportunities when it comes to the continent. There's a large amount of opportunities when it comes to collaboration and sharing of experiences between Europe, as we've seen as well, Brazil and Africa. So I'd like to conclude by wishing all the teams working on this topic the best of luck. As Ibrahim said, take the chance to network and meet other people who are working in a similar field. We've seen that the more these services go online and go digital, there's a need for increased trust. Cybersecurity is a crucial and fundamental aspect when it comes to financial services and financial inclusion. And we're going to continue on the next topic when it comes to digital economy, where we hope to continue the discussion with a new panel talking about these services. So once again, thank you so much to the panelists and best of luck to the teams. Let's see what they come up with by tomorrow on the grand finale. Thank you so much, and welcoming you all to the next panel, which starts in about 2 minutes. Thank you.